Hello and welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg, and today we're going to be looking at creating portability for Python files. It's a great way to distribute your files without making it a burden and having people to do command line installs. Before we get into it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. But let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so pretty much I'm going to go through a couple things, and then we're actually going to do an example just to be able to kind of cover exactly what we're doing here. So right off the bat, I have a Raspberry Pi 5 that I'm running this on. It doesn't really matter which Raspberry Pi, and it doesn't really matter whether it's Linux, Windows, or Mac. Technically, there's a variant of these instructions or of the commands that you would use to be able to run it on any of them. So just starting right off with this, right, we don't want to send PY files anymore because people have to have the actual environment and all of the packages that are related to it already installed. And especially if they're not that tech savvy, it doesn't really help them to have them try and struggle through this just to run the script that you've created for them. So the idea is technically we're creating a standalone executable. And it's not, I will say it's not actually compiling the code, right? So it's not making machine language out of it, but it is at least creating a self-contained environment. So it will be in a binary format once it's done on Linux, or a .exe, executable on Windows. But at the end of the day, it's freezing. So what freezing is it's pretty much just capturing the current state of your code and packaging it into like a zip format with all of its dependencies and the Python runtime environment. So everything is self-contained and ready to go. And there's a few variations that you could do with that for how, if you want it to be a folder, if you want it to just be an executable, all in one. Today we're only covering the self-contained executable, but one of the ways that we're going to actually cover that is to be able to do a virtual environment. But we'll just go with some of the pros and cons of doing this way, right? So it's accessible, so anybody can run it. But I will say there's one restriction that we'll cover in a second related to how you build it. But at the end of the day, it's pretty straightforward and can be automated in many cases. It's reliable, so once you've bundled it, it prevents dependency conflicts because it does run it in its own virtual environment when it runs. So it won't conflict with any of your existing dependencies, your package versions, anything else like that. It's just going to run it locally based on what's in the archive itself. And it's protected. It hides your source code. So the only time the source code is actually on the machine itself, or the Python file, is when it's executed and running, and it's only in a temporary folder, so it's not exposed to the user. So you don't have to worry about that. Some of the cons are that the files can be kind of large because you are including the entire Python environment as well as any dependencies, so that can make it a little bit bloated versus something that would be, I would say, compiled using like C++, for example, or just passing the script along. And it can have slow startup as well because it has to unzip itself. So depending on their speed, and how many dependencies and files and things like that you have included, it can be a little bit slower. But I will say, in my experience, it is not significantly slower with computer speeds these days. And then it's platform specific. So if you build on Windows, you can only run it on Windows. If you build on Linux, you can only run it on Linux. And if you build for Mac, you can only run it on Mac. And even then, like with Linux, for example, Red Hat versus, Ubuntu versus Debian generally, it's just something you got to build on the environment that you're going to run it. And then also antivirus issues. Because it is an executable and it is obfuscating the code, it can get false flagged. And I do have some suggestions as far as mitigations that you can actually do to be able to kind of alleviate that issue as well. So the golden rule as we get started with this is that we always are going to use a clean virtual environment. And that's the number one way to prevent a bloated executable, because if you're doing a lot of development on your machine, anything else like that, it's going to be very difficult to make sure that you uninstall all of the unneeded dependencies, packages that you installed previously, etc. So having a clean virtual environment is definitely the key. So how do we actually do that? Right? So let's actually get into the code. And this is part of the reason why we're doing this on this Raspberry Pi. And I'm running Raspberry Pi OS, but really it works on Ubuntu. It works on pretty much everything. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. And look at that, it's bigger. So I'm going to drag this up just so hopefully you can see it. But pretty much what we're going to do is we're just going to create a folder. It doesn't say it here, but we're going to create a clean virtual environment just like it said. And virtual environments are tied to particular folders. So like right now, I'm just in the home directory. We're just going to put this on the desktop. So I'll cd to the desktop. And we actually have a few things here. I have a demo folder, which is a virtual environment I created previously to make sure that this is actually going to run. So let's do this. We'll make a directory. So we'll do make dir, and we'll call it live demo. Now we'll cd into that live demo folder. We see that there's nothing in there at all. So now let's go ahead and create our virtual environment. So we'll do python -m venv venv. And what this is going to do is it's going to copy in the executables needed in order to be able to run everything. So we see the venv folder has been created. And if we actually ls that as well, we can see it's got its own bin folder, include, lib, etc., and the Python config. So it's completely separate now as far as it's concerned. But in order for us to actually use it, we need to activate it. So the way that we do that is by doing source venv, right, which is that folder. And this is a relative path, so it doesn't start with a slash. Then we'll do bin, and then we'll do activate. It is a different command if you do this on Windows. If you check out GitHub, I already have a link in the description, but it covers both of those things, and it also provides some additional instructions and a lot more detailed explanation than what we're going to cover on the video here today. So we're going to hit source and activate the file. And what we see here is that venv shows up at the start of our command prompt. So we're still in the same path that we were, but we see we're running in that virtual environment. So it's important to stay cognizant. If we did want to get out of this and go back to our regular terminal, we could either close the terminal or do deactivate. If I spell it right. If you spell it right, it will deactivate it, and then you'll be back at your regular terminal, and the venv will go away. But obviously, we want to be inside there right now. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to move in our files. I've already prepared the files that we're actually going to use to demo this. Actually, we'll do step 2 first. So first, we're going to install our dependencies. How do we know what our dependencies are? So we should actually take a look at that. Right, so I'm just going to minimize this really quick. So I have this quote app, which is what we're going to do. It's just going to open a window and give you a quote of the day that it gets from a web page that just generates a single quote. And if we actually look in side of it, oh, that is not the editor I want to use. Let's use Thony. Right, and I have the instructions in here as well. The file's also available on GitHub as well. But we could see that it has a number of things that it needs it to import. Some of them are default. One of them in particular, which is requests, is not default. So we need to import that dependency as well as what we need in order to be able to generate the final file, right? Which will be pip install pyinstaller request. And that's the same thing that we see down here. So we can copy this, go back to our terminal where we're in the virtual environment, paste that in, hit enter. It's going to start downloading all of those needed dependencies, and now it's ready to go. So obviously we have to bring in the actual file that we're going to use before we run the actual builder itself. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy it from the desktop. So we'll do cp ... which will get us back to the desktop since we made this at the desktop and that's where the file is. If we hit tab twice, it'll show us a list of what's available. And we see quote app is one of them. And then we want to put it in the local file that we're in, folder that we're in. So we're just going to put a dot and hit enter. And we're going to do the same thing with an icon file. So the icon file is important because we want it to be branded. We want it to look nice and pretty. So we're going to do the same thing. cp ... icon, logo.ico, which actually should be, I believe, icon. We should check that. No, logo.ico is correct. Okay, good. And we're just going to put that in the local directory as well. So now if we actually look, we see we have our logo ICO, we have our quote app.py, and our VENV folder. And that's all that exists in our current folder. So next we're going to run the actual pyinstaller itself. And what this is going to do is it's going to create the single file output, right? So it's going to be the single exe, or in this case, the single binary for Linux. It is saying that it's going to be windowed, which means that when it runs, it's not going to show a console. It will show the icon and then the icon file as the bundled asset, in addition to the most important one, which is our actual file, the script that we want to run when we do it. We could actually exclude all of this and just run quote.app, and it would create some output. We could do a few of these, it's got a lot of options, but we're just covering this one here because we just want to see it go to a single file. So again, we're still inside of our virtual environment. We're going to paste in what we just copied from the for the pyinstaller command line. We're going to hit enter. And I do want to say this, and I already tested this ahead of time, but it's very important that it runs correctly in your virtual environment before you run pyinstaller. Otherwise, you're going to have a terrible time trying to debug this. It's very difficult to debug it once it is packaged because it's expected to be done at that point. It's not going to give you a command line. It's not going to give you a traceback. It's considered deployed. So just something to keep in mind. But once it is done, it's actually going to create a few new folders, and we see build and dist over here. Well, there you go. Now you see it. Build and dist over here on the right. Build are what it uses to be able to build the actual file itself, and they're just kind of temporary files, but we're not going to use them. But the final output is in dist. So if we ls dist, we see it's just quote app, but it's a binary. So let's actually deactivate our virtual environment. And we can actually just go ahead and run that. So we could just do, where do we put it? Dist. No. There we go. Dist / quote app. When we run that, we see that it actually runs with our quote of the day. It is in a window as part of our UI. And all we have to do now is hit the button to get a new quote. And we see the quote is, "All that a man achieves and all that he fails to achieve is the direct result of his own thoughts," from James Allen. And if we want a new quote, "Rich people have small TVs and big libraries, and poor people have small libraries and big TVs," from Zig Ziglar. So, whether you agree with the quotes or not, that's not what it's here to do. It's just here to actually get something using a non-standard package that is not usually shipped with Python. One of the nice things about developing on Raspberry Pi OS is that it comes pre-installed with Python and Python pip. So you don't have to go through a number of additional hoops that we didn't cover in this video, and in this example about how to install the Python environment and things like that. So it's definitely more challenging on Windows, where you have to install everything and all the commands are different. So just keep that in mind. But, right, we just exited out of it. It's still saying icon file not found. I actually have some more. If you check out the GitHub, it will cover some details surrounding how to resolve that. We're not going to do that here because it requires abstracting the file using another file, and I think it just makes the demo a little too crazy. But we can actually even run this just from the desktop really quick. So we'll minimize all of this really quick and go to our folder that we created, go to our dist. We see the app is here. This is our executable. We're just going to execute it, and we see we get to the same exact thing. And our quote here, "The quality, not the longevity of one's life is what's important," and that's from Martin Luther King Jr. So it works. So going on from here, some pro tips and troubleshooting here. So if the file size is too big, you can actually compress it using a tool called UPX to be able to compress that exe to make it a little more, I would say, space efficient and easily more portable. And then if the startup is too slow, you could distribute it using one directory. So it's one folder instead of using the one file. And that can make it easier because then it doesn't have to unzip it at all. And the big thing here is obviously security. Antivirus in particular, because you're creating an exe, is not going to recognize the fingerprint associated with that file. So it is entirely possible that it will get flagged as being potentially malicious. One of the ways to do it is you can actually go to VirusTotal to be able to do diagnostics and see which antiviruses are going to potentially flag it. It won't register it or anything like that. You'd have to intentionally put an exception in your antivirus to be able to keep it from flagging it or causing issues. And there's ways to get around that by putting signed certificates associated with it to be able to make sure that it doesn't get flagged by antivirus. And this, of course, is more of an issue for Windows and Mac, things like that. Some Linux machines, especially in corporate environments, will have various antivirus applications that are running them as well. So there's a lot of potential for getting I would say, counteracting the ease with security. So just something to keep in mind. And then pretty much from there, you're ready to distribute it. So it makes it really easy to be able to create a simple and portable file to be able to, make your work, show your work. And especially to people who aren't familiar with this type of how to install Linux applications in general, let alone Python and pip packages. It definitely makes it a lot easier. So thanks for watching the stream today. If you like it, be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. And if you know anybody who would like this content, I would appreciate it if you share it with them, and I hope they would appreciate it too. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And then hit that notification bell. That way you know the next time we're getting extended. So until then, take care.